So today we have two experts in marketing and analytics, and they are going to share their domain knowledge. Jillian is going to speak on leveraging analytics to market in the new retail age. As we all know, COVID-19 is really kind of throwing a loop in everything, and we're all kind of jumping online. So, how do we define our customer? How do we look at our customer? What do we do with that? And how do we use analytics to kind of answer that question? So really excited to have her here. Jillian, I will turn it over to you.
Sounds good. All right. In this day and age, there is always risk of sharing screens. So I will do my best to make sure that all you see is my PowerPoint presentation. Okay. All right. All right. If anyone can just let me know that they're seeing my screen.
We are seeing your screen. Wonderful.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Well, thanks everyone for spending a little bit of time with me today on your Friday. And thanks to the FocusKPI guys for reaching out and giving me this opportunity. Want to make sure I spend most of the amount of time that I can in the content. So let's jump right in. We'll start with a bit about me. As you can see from this slide, this is what my apartment would look like if I dusted a little bit more often. But we'll talk a little bit about my career path as well. Then get into the meat of the discussion around what the evolution of customer looks like at Vistaprint. And Q&A, I'm trying to leave some time at the end, but as Joseph said, if you have things that you'd like to raise, feel free to interject and he'll find a way to get those questions to me, or I'll check the chat box as we go. So how did a liberal arts grad that was focused in communication and Spanish end up as an analytics manager focusing in this more technical space? I will say D and A probably throughout the presentation. That's what we call data and analytics at Vistaprint. So you can see down here, DNA. So if you hear DNA, that's what it means. So what I do today in a lot of ways is bring the DNA perspective to the table when marketing and technology are having discussions around bringing new vendors in, launching new features, building new report suites. So that is kind of the role that I play today. So how did this happen? I won't go through my whole career path, because I'm not the most concise person. But also because I'd like to focus on some moments instead. First kind of moment that I'll mention is the ability to focus on really important goals, celebrate those goals, but always also keep an eye towards the future. So when I was in school, I was really focused on school. Graduating valedictorian was a goal of mine. I accomplished that. It was really exciting. I had spent a long time focused on this goal, and focus helped me accomplish that. And I was able to have that moment and say, like, to myself, that was a great accomplishment. But sometimes when you have that focus and you're really looking in this one particular goal, you reach graduation, look up and realize on the other side of this peak, the world is waiting for you. So always, encourage yourself to keep that focus, but keep an eye ahead of you as well. And when I was thinking about where do I go next, I had an interview with WB Mason. WB Mason is business to business office supplies, janitorial supplies. You might have seen their boxes of paper around. And I interviewed for a marketing position. And somewhere along the line, I got offered an analyst job. And their analytics group was pretty small. They didn't even really have a job description for the role. And I had to decide whether or not I was going to make that jump. And I spent about 1.5 years there, kind of getting my feet underneath me and figuring out what it was in this particular industry to be an analyst. And I'd say connections and my support system played a really big role in both my decision to join WB Mason, my relationships while I was there, and also how I moved into my next step and kind of moved into Vistaprint as a next step in my career. When I was deciding whether or not to do this, I relied on my support system. And in that moment, it was my mom. As I was trying to explain what this role was, whether or not I wanted to do it, she paused and said, "Hey, like, sweetie, you've been an analyst since you were 3." She was not wrong. I have always been a curious person. I have always been a proponent of 5 whys, even when I was 5, and didn't really know what philosophy was. So this was something that, she was able to see might actually be a good fit for me. And so that was a really important moment for me. While I was at WB Mason, I was able to make a really strong peer connection with someone else who was also trying to get their legs in this industry. I tailed along as they pushed for learning how to code, and we forged this path together until I got enough momentum on my own to figure out what my career trajectory was going to be. He's still a connection I keep in touch with. He's now a data engineer. I'm still in the analytics space. And so what I would say is rely on the people who know you, get to know more people, but also do this in non-traditional places. I ended up at Vistaprint and kind of getting an interview there because I was talking about wanting to make a career move at an volleyball league game. And someone on my team worked at Vistaprint and knew they were always looking for analysts. And I'd like to believe that it was our deep, enduring bond of teammateship that caused that person to say, "Hey, I have a great company for you." It could have, though, been the employee referral bonus process. Still don't know. But it got my toe in the door. And I've been at Vistaprint almost 8 years. In that time, I've gone through a bunch of learning cycles. I started in kind of this email and CRM, like customer relationship management space. I learned how to code. I learned about A/B testing. I learned about customer segmentation. I then ended up supporting the customer service department from an analytics perspective. I learned customer centricity from the marketing that we put out there, to the website, to the manufacturing process, to the delivery process. It was eye-opening. It was phenomenal. I then moved into a part of my career where I was supporting an aspect of the website, really focused in design. In that space, I learned more about product management. I learned about P&L, like profit and loss balance sheets, how to work in an agile squad with technologists and software engineers, which I loved. And those things, ended up actually being very strong building blocks in the role that I have today. I work with marketing to be customer-centric and enable new features with technology. So it doesn't always work out that way. Usually say when you look back, it makes sense. But in the moment, those were risks that I had to take and rotations that I left myself open to learn new things and kind of take that jump. The last piece that I would say here is, this background of not being as technical was always a chip that I had on my shoulder. And it was a very useful chip for a while because it was motivating. It encouraged me to catch up in a lot of ways and walk the walk with, colleagues who were econ and stats and computer science, majors. But for a while, I always wondered whether or not it diminished me because I didn't have the same background. And what I will just say is that sometimes the things that are non-traditional about you, sometimes the things that, are in your experience that you learn to lean into are your strengths. And in a lot of ways, I've come to see my background as the ace up my sleeve. So don't diminish your experiences, try to lean into them. But that is enough about me in a nutshell. Let's talk about the company that I work for so we can talk about what customer means to Vistaprint and how that's changed. So Vistaprim 101, imagine that you're walking down a city block and you pass a pet supply store that has a poster in the window talking about social distance guidelines. And then you pass a barbershop that has a banner outside of it saying, here's our reopening protocol. And then, you pass another restaurant and it has an A-frame sign outside, and that A-frame sign, has the new takeout and delivery, process. These pieces of marketing material and communication that small and micro business owners have with their customer base, this is something that we enable. The print process, having a good product assortment, making design easy, And we work with consumers too. So if you get home and find, an invite to a graduation ceremony, maybe not something that would happen today, but we also, in the time of the pandemic, now not only offer save the dates for wedding, but also change the dates, because love is in the air. It's still in the air. It just got a breeze until next year. So that is a lot of kind of the product and the goals that we have as Vistaprint. But design plays a really strong role in how we think about the customer experience and the offers that we have for how customers engage with us. And so the next slide is a little bit about our customer matrix that was the norm for a really long time. And because we were so tied, in a sense, to design, you really, as a customer, got the most value out of Vistaprint when you had an account. And that was on purpose, right? Like, we want to both support our customers to say, hey, if you have a logo, like, make an account, keep it with us. It's a place for you to keep some of your business identity, your order history with us, but also for us to be making product recommendations, etc. You could still browse the site without an account, but really the account is where a lot of the power was. The key differentiator was whether or not you had purchased with us yet or had not. This was really straightforward for the business. It was straightforward from a data perspective. It was really nice and neat. Everyone has an ID, everyone has a user ID, everyone has a registration date. But if you think about it, it's a bit rigid for the customer, right? Like, if they just want to get emails from us but aren't ready to commit to an account, like, that's not something that we were offering at the time. So this was normal Vistaprint, right? But as all of us know, if you've been following the news, normal took a hard right at the beginning of this year. And all of a sudden, we're in a very different space. And a lot of our strategies are needing to change. We're needing to assess whether or not we're meeting the needs of our customers in this new time, and what that means for us as a brand. So I won't spend as much time on the Vistaprint core space or the Promotique space, because masks is really the catalyst around the customer discussion that we'll have today. But just so that, we touch upon it, the core brand introduced some new products. We updated some of our designs and use cases for existing products. Promotique is a brand that offers a lot more products that you would see at like a trade show or a conference. Branded flashlights and water bottles, branded hand sanitizer. So there was a renewed focus on key products in this space. But let's talk about masks. So when we looked at our product assortment and we looked at the market, there's a gap in the market, there's a gap in our product assortment. Customers are looking for masks. We want to get masks in the hands of customers. We were making certain decisions around how quickly we could make this happen. And being a company that is in many ways tied to design and customization and customer accounts, we, again, had some decisions to make. If we went live with masks not being able to be customized, knowing that that would be an increment that we'd get to, what would that mean? What's the trade-off in terms of speed and effort? And if we decide not to have customization as something that we're offering out of the gate, then do we need accounts? And if we save on customization and accounts from a technology kind of effort and investment perspective, then how much faster can we get to market? And so it was decided that we wouldn't require accounts and we would invest in customization, but it wouldn't be something that we offered on day one. And so that means, very quickly we're introducing the concept of guest checkout, which means you give us an email so we can still send you an order confirmation or a delivery confirmation, but you don't have an account with us. And the email team, not wanting to be left behind, also wanted the ability for customers to say, hey, like, I want to sign up for marketing emails, but I'm also not ready to make an account. So for a moment, let's reflect on like this pre-pandemic customer matrix. Pretty straightforward. What happens now when we have guest checkout and non-account email sign up, right? we now have a much more complex customer landscape. And we need to figure out, do I want to identify and or treat someone that has an account but hasn't purchased, this kind of corner up here, any differently from the people that haven't registered, haven't bought, but are saying, please email me, right? And what should our goal be there? Is the goal to get them to convert on a purchase, or is the goal to become a customer that has an account? And so this space just becomes a little bit more complex. And this space now exists in each of the brands that we also offer. So let's just take a look at one hypothetical customer journey and what that journey looks like in data. So meet Sasha. They own a cafe in Ireland. Their folks live in the UK. We'll get to that, right? Sasha is thinking about their business and they're saying, okay, I think I need to make some posters about social distancing and put them in my cafe. They navigate to Vistaprint.com. They're looking around. They see that we also sell masks. They navigate to our mask brand. On a consumer level, like a personal level, they make a personal mask purchase. They know that they're going to be visiting their family. They are looking to purchase a mask for themselves and their parents. So they do that, but they still haven't really created an account in masks or with Vistaprint. Now they navigate back to Vistaprint.com and they say, okay, now I'm ready to start designing these posters for my business, maybe some new menus with our takeout options. I'm going to register for an account, save my designs, and then something happens in life. They get distracted. They end up visiting their parents because they're a really great child and they're going to live with their parents during the pandemic. But their cafe isn't shut down. Their employees are still keeping it running. So they land in the UK. Now they log into the UK. They still have all their designs. They're like, great, I'm now going to order my posters. I'm going to order my posters, I'm going to order my menus. So Sasha makes that purchase. A couple days later, calls customer service, realizes, hey, like I actually want to talk to you guys about your delivery protocols. And if there's anything that I should know with COVID-19, what should I tell my employees? You know, what are the protocols? They have that discussion. Time passes, they go out for a walk, they're doing some errands, and they see some other small businesses offering, you know, things to their customers that maybe Sasha wants to emulate. They see one shop that's offering hand sanitizer with every purchase. And so they navigate online again, they search, they figure out that Promotique can provide them with a custom hand sanitizer solution, but they're not ready to pull the trigger. So they sign up for email, and that's kind of where we leave Sasha. We know, because we've pulled the curtain back, that this journey all belongs to one person. But what does this look like in data? The next slide is busy. I'll only be there for a second, I promise. This is what Sasha looks like now in the database. And you can see it's kind of a bit of a patchwork. It's no longer, you know, where we were, which was almost every single action being tied to a user ID that has an account, one email associated to that user ID. We need to start stitching this information together to understand the concept of Sasha. So how do we do that? What are the tools available to us as we think about this and as we move forward in this space? So householding is something that isn't necessarily new to the industry. It's something that a lot of companies that focus in direct mail and print campaigns are very familiar with, especially if you're sending a more expensive print piece. If anyone recalls being sent college view books, right? Like those things are expensive. So if, you know, your parent or guardian was searching for colleges and you were as well, and that college wants to send a view book to that house, they don't want to send two, they want to save their money. So they're going to try to understand what is the best bang for our buck? How many of these can we send and still reach the max amount of customers who are interested? Take that into kind of a digital age, right? Like a digital space. And we are not only taking kind of this address concept of getting people to a house, we're saying, well, now there's multiple emails that represent this customer entity. Now there are anonymous visitor IDs potentially that manifest into a person we recognize. Sorry, question? Good. Sorry, that manifests into a customer that we recognize and their user ID. And how do we stuff all of this into a house, right? And in doing so, there are, some really great benefits to getting this right. We can work from one concept of a customer, right? And that allows us to have smarter targeting, smarter segmentation. If we think back to the example of Sasha, under one email address, they're making a consumer very personal purchase, a couple of masks. But with another email, despite them being the same entity, they are purchasing very business-focused things at quantities that you would associate with a small business. And so if we didn't have this practice in place, if we weren't working towards this, we could potentially be talking to the same person in very different ways without recognizing the fact that they actually, as a person, have business and personal needs that Vistaprint can be fulfilling, and we should talk to them as a hybrid customer. And as I mentioned before, there's the benefit of reducing marketing spend, because if you are really kind of tying a lot of these identities into an entity, you are focusing your targeting efforts on the right level and getting to that customer level. But with any aggregation, as we know as analysts, like as any aggregation, you need to make decisions. If you're going from an item level table that has all of the product information you want to an order level table, you can sum your sales, you can sum your bookings, but to get there, you have to make decisions. You have to aggregate, you have to choose first, last, most recent. So when we think about Sasha as well, like what country do we associate this entity to? If the general manager of the UK comes up to you as an analyst and says, who are all of my customers? And then the general manager of Ireland does the same, right? Where does Sasha belong? And so we have to start making these decisions and making these calls. Same for which email to represent in our targeting marketing schemes, and whether or not their preferences on those emails should reflect only that email or all the emails associated to an entity. So many decisions. Amongst these also are how we can take this concept, right? This aggregated concept that the DNA team, the data and analytics team is building, and propagate it through the rest of the business to get this entity into the tools and tables that everyone's using on a day-to-day basis to get the value. So we are knee deep in this, right? At Vistaprint, we are trying to figure out what this looks like for us and how to build this concept of a customer entity. But what we have decided, amongst all the decisions that we do need to make, what we have decided is that it's worth it. It's absolutely worth it for us. And the reason that we find it's worth it, despite the fact that we're introducing new tension, right? This new tension around a more flexible customer experience leading to more complex treatment and data decisions, is because it's the direction that the company wants to be moving in. It's the direction that we want to be offering our customers. We want to be more customer-centric. In the space that we were, again, it was a little bit more rigid. It was a little bit more straightforward. It was very business-centric. So the pandemic, in a sense, for us, really accelerated some of the strategies that we had on our horizon when we launched a lot of these experiences to meet the moment that we are in. So when you launch a lot of these new experiences, by virtue of the fact that something has changed, like data is coming along for the ride, right? Like we need to figure out then how to react to the experiences that have been launched and develop our perspective on those experiences accordingly. When we develop reports, right, if we bring it back to this customer entity piece, we need to say, when the data and analytics team is counting customer and we are propagating that in reports that go to the business, this is how we're talking about customer. And that in turn impacts the culture, right? It impacts the types of questions that we get about customer. It impacts the way that people are thinking about building treatments and building segmentations. And it ends up just being a cycle, right? Because when you have a more customer-centric culture, you introduce more customer-focused experiences, and the data keeps evolving and changing. So whatever we end up with in terms of like a household customer entity, we also recognize the need for it to be flexible and scalable. That is kind of a little bit in a nutshell of the direction we're going, the impetus that pushed us there. I will, before we get to Q&A, because I saw a bunch of chats kind of coming through and I want to make sure I have some time for that. Before we get to Q&A, I guess I'll just leave you with this thought. It's not necessarily revolutionary. If you've read, up a lot on what people say, are useful things to have as you build a career or a business, you've probably seen these before, but for me, what they mean, when I think about flexibility, when you think about your career, like I thought I would be a teacher, potentially someday. But as much as I'm not a teacher in name, I have onboarded countless analysts. I have trained a lot of analysts and non-analysts. I am passionate about data literacy and making data more approachable for others. I'm proud of those accomplishments. I thought I'd be an author. Maybe someday, definitely, I will someday write that fantasy series that has been banging around my head for the last couple of years. But in the interim, I tell stories every day. And that's something that also keeps me engaged, whether it's slide writing or, goodness, even sometimes emails. You got to spend some time, really cutting down to the stuff that matters. So, thinking about the things that you're passionate about, your strengths in a flexible way and how they can manifest in your day-to-day. Resilience for me is flexibility with circumstance, circumstances that aren't always auspicious, and recognizing your strengths in those moments. So whether you're a business owner, or just a person looking to develop themselves, I would say, always just make sure that you're recognizing your strengths and to the best of your ability, leaning into them. Again, wanted to leave time for questions, especially since this is a more of an interactive space. If we don't have as many questions, I do have some bonus material. And if you don't think of them right now, you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn. So with that, I know I'm at 4:30. I know we started a little bit deeper than 4. I want to leave time for Jerry. Joseph, do you think we want to spend time with questions here?
Yeah, I think we can spend about 5 minutes with questions.
Okay.
I'll open it up to the audience and see what they have. I will start by asking you, now one of the things, and I can actually put this back on, one of the things that I know of is that when you go to a more customer-centric view, you said so yourself, the data increases. So then 2 questions. One, where are you in that process? Like, how are you, do you feel like you've made significant progress in that? Could you make more? I mean, we can always make more, but you know what I'm saying? And how has it impacted the data engineering behind the analytics and behind the data?
Yeah, data engineering. Whew, they are absolutely our strong partners and necessary in handling the amount of data and the stitching that we're needing to do to make sense of what this entity means, right? In terms of where we are in the process, we've got a pretty good handle on the events that we need to track down that are tied to identity, right? So we know where those data systems are now that we've launched these experiences. And even just finding where those data systems are is enough of a job. For instance, we're going to be allowing our customers to update their email address, right? And this is even something that I think launched this week, right? So while we thought we had a pretty good handle on like, hey, like, here is the information coming from mask orders, here's the information coming from anonymous email signups, like here's the information coming from old school registrations, you know, and we're comfortable in that, and we're using email address, we're primarily using our user IDs to begin that householding process. We now have another data set we need to chase to say, hey, this was, you know, a previously active email, and now this is the new active email for this one particular entity. So I know it's a bit long-winded just to say we are constantly having to reassess where these data sources are, make sure that we feel confident in the ones that we've found, and partner strongly with data engineering to create hashed IDs, to protect privacy, to build and document tables that allow us to get to the benefits of householding.
And what sort of challenges did you have in terms of linking, you know, that slide that you had with all, when you listed out the data for Sasha, like there wasn't a lot of commonalities there. So, you know, what were some of the challenges, and what were some of the ways that you found that you could relate that data?
Yeah, so we are trying to understand the types of data infrastructure that we need to do that effectively, right? If you've worked in site data before, you may have heard the term clickstream or navigation. So for us, understanding the customer journey, you know, on the site from the time that they entered to when they have an identity event, right? Providing their email address, registering with us, connecting those events is really critical. So we are in the process of kind of developing a data product around, you know, the stringing together of events in order to stitch identities. A lot of it is also just your run-of-the-mill data cleaning. You know, making sure that we are raising if there are email validation issues, you know, figuring out which bugs are for us to fix versus for technology to fix. Like, you know, when one of our new platforms went live, you know, records were entering a table that were incorrect, right? And we have to raise the fact that like, hey, this is a bug, and then work with technology to fix it moving forward. But it doesn't mean that they back scrubbed. So we are constantly having to figure out what is the line between what we need to data engineer ourselves around and out of and into, and where do we raise back to the business that the data that they're sending is inadequate or is buggy. And that is just a constant process.
All right, last question here, came in through the chat. What are your new skills that you're learning? What are your goals for your new skills?
Ooh, the learning cycle that I guess I'm in personally, whether it's related to this project or broader beyond that, one is presenting, so challenging myself to do stuff like this, which is why like I was really serious about thanking the FocusKPI group for the opportunity, because if I'm going to be someone in the industry who has a perspective and get that out there, you know, I need to be willing to put myself out there. So thank you for their persistence in making sure that this is something that ended up on my schedule. So that is something that I want to be investing in. Becoming a people manager, like I have had direct reports for a year.
Okay.
Sometimes I look at that and say, oh gosh, it's been a year. Like I should know more than I know by now. And sometimes I have to remind myself that a year is a very short time in a career. So that's important. And then in my role in channel enablement, just becoming a better expert in channels aside from the ones that I already have a background in. So continuing to develop my technical expertise there.
Well, thank you. And thanks, that was a great presentation. I really appreciate it. I liked how the explanation of all the different touch points, and then how they came together, and then where that was going in the household. I thought that was a great explanation.
Thanks. And yeah, if anybody else thinks of something offline, then you can always find me on LinkedIn.
Wonderful. All right, and up next we have